really hard not to put a lot of pressure on yourself as a trainer. I think trainers that put themselves on a specific timeline, this dog's got to be doing this by this day, or 2 weeks and 4 weeks, and et cetera. And that's just really not how it is. You really just got to kind of look at the dog in front of you and take everything accounted for, whether it's the way it's bred or just the age of it or just the mental maturity of it, and just go as fast as the dog will let you. And you start pushing dogs and you start digging yourself in a hole. Some of this stuff I learned the hard way, and some of it's I have a handful of really good trainers that I look up to, and I can give a call and send a video to and be like, what do you think about this? And you ever seen this before? And what am I doing wrong? Am I timing off? Timing's so important when you look at things like force fetch and steadiness and everything else. So, I use primarily the West method, and I do kind of deviate from that at some point. But as far as steadiness goes, I really like the way it looks to the dog. It makes sense to the dog. It's pretty simple. And I like to keep things pretty dang simple because they're just dogs, and
all right, everybody, welcome on the show for the first time, Ryan McIntosh of Southern Wires. Ryan, how we doing today, man?
Oh, I'm doing good. Been on the road all day, but we're still turning and burning.
Yeah, you're just telling me that you're on the way up to North Dakota right now. I assume that it has something to do with some training, but what else you got going on up there?
So I've got a dog in heat that's out of my kennel. That'll be the first time breeding her, so I'm going up there to have a little date with Miss Lori and Silo, and gonna make the trip worth it and do a little training for about a week or so and just get out of the heat.
Yeah. What's the temperature swing back? Because you're from Texas, right? And then you're headed to North Dakota. What's the temperature swing there?
So I woke up when I left at 4:30 this morning, my truck read 83 degrees as the low, and I think they're looking at they're starting their days out in the low 50s.
Oh man.
So I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, I don't think we quite have the Texas heat, but we're not too far off from you here in Tennessee. And man, I woke up yesterday and it was in the low 60s, and that's the lowest it's been in weeks. Usually I've been waking up and it's already in the low 80s range. Yeah. So I feel you, man. I don't blame you for going up north to get some work in.
Yeah, absolutely. I just loaded up a bunch of birds and headed up north, and there's some NAVTA training grounds about 20 minutes away from where I'll be. So
nice.
I'll have access to. Yeah.
Yep. Well, we're going to get into some breeding talk and what you have going on and essentially your backstory. But, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, tell everybody a little bit more about yourself. Obviously, you're out of Texas. We already hit on that, but just kind of introduce yourself and just tell everybody what it is that you run and do.
So like you said, my name's Ryan McIntosh. I'm with Southern Wires Kennel. I kind of based out of North Texas, right on the border of Oklahoma, kind of on the edge of where it starts getting into more West Texas looking stuff. And essentially I'm a breeder and full-time trainer.
Is it just wire hairs that you breed and train, or, well, obviously you take in other client dogs, but yourself, are you only running wire hairs?
Yeah. So I only raise wire hairs, and I do have a little cocker that I'm pretty fond of. She's become kind of an essential part of the team. She kind of pulls her weight in kibble. I mean, she only eats about 10 kibbles a day, and she'll just go day after day after day. And I originally just got her when I started doing the guided hunts, and I needed a flushing dog and some help finding dead birds and things like that. And she really kind of filled that hole, and most of them are put and take hunts, so it's just a bunch of birds just getting killed all day long. But it's a way to kind of break up my training routine come fall, and I can lower my client dogs quite a bit just by, guiding and kind of help the financial books there a little bit while I'm not training so many dogs, and it allows me to hunt, keeps my dogs into birds. And, but yeah, no, as far as client dogs, I pretty much take any pointing dog breed. I like them all. I think working with a bunch of different dogs really makes you a better trainer. And I think this is my third year, full-time pro. So, just every year you just kind of keep growing and growing. And hopefully, word of mouth kind of keeps you busy.
Right. How long before you went full time? Like when were you dabbling for a few years? Like how long have you been training as a whole, not just full time?
So we want to back all the way up. I got my first wire hair, my first pointing dog in 2015, and then lost her about a year later. Unfortunate accident. She got hit by a car. Got her kind of like from a breeder that wasn't really well known. So the next time around, I really did some research and waited about 8 months for the puppy I got from Dan Griffith in South Dakota. And her name's Cora. She's been kind of the just the heart of the kennel. Honestly, she got me. I just dove in head first and started training buddies' dogs here and there, helping people out. You get into homing pigeons. That's a whole nother hobby in all itself. And but yeah, just training with NAVDA groups and seminars. You learn something from everybody, and then you kind of see all these different methods people use to train, all these different setups they use to kind of create the habit that you want. And I was just like a sponge for a couple of years there, and then I started training buddies' dogs part-time, and then it just got to where I got so many offers to train dogs, and I was just like, well, why am I going to my 7 to 3:30 every day? So talked to the wife, and I jumped ship and really never looked back, man. It's just been kind of growing and growing, and there's been some growing pains here and there, but I couldn't be happy with how things are going.
Yeah.
As far as that goes. So qualified 2 dogs for the Invitational this year. Both are dogs that I bred, or puppies out of Cora. So you look at her progeny report, she's done really well when you look at NAVDA and natural ability and stuff like that. And a lot of her puppies are just now kind of coming to the age where they're starting to do the higher end stuff. And so it'll be interesting to see how, I'm driving up here right now to breed my Lori dog, who was out of the first litter, bred Cord. And she's so it's the first Southern Wires breeding, that homebred dog. So I'm really anxious to see how she produces, and
yeah, that's got to be some
everything's
exciting
kind of
stuff.
coming together.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because you and I mean, aside from a quick like 5-minute phone call the other day before we decided to do this, we haven't really spoken, but we've kind of mirrored the paralleled the same timeline almost. We kind of got started around the same time. Aside from the breeding, we've kind of paralleled each other a little bit, and I've been able to watch through social media. It's funny how social media is like you kind of feel like some people that you've never met or really spoken to before. But that's kind of what led us here, is that, through the same timing and the learning curves, if you will, I've, seen you in the other social media groups and just kind of collecting all of the same information and tools and everything. And again, aside from the breeding, I can relate to so much of what you're saying. You train a few of your buddies' dogs, and all of a sudden more and more people keep asking, and it had to be more. What was it like when you finally decided that you're going to go full time into the dog training and take that leap of faith? It's like when you look at it, you said 2015. That says 9 years ago. Seems like a lifetime ago, but in the grand scheme of things, it's relatively quick, especially when you start looking at some of the other guys in the trade. So what was it like branching out on your own and being like, you know what, we're going to give this an actual shot. We're going to try and do this thing?
Yeah, it's really hard not to put a lot of pressure on yourself as a trainer, especially when you got kind of looking at, I think, trainers that put themselves on a specific timeline. This dog's got to be doing this by this day, or 2 weeks and 4 weeks, and et cetera. And that's just really not how it is. You really just got to kind of look at the dog in front of you and take everything accounted for, whether it's the way it's bred or just the age of it or just the mental maturity of it, and just go as fast as the dog will let you. And you start pushing dogs and you start kind of digging yourself in a hole with that particular dog. So, and some of this stuff I learned the hard way, and some of it's I have a handful of really good trainers that I look up to, and I can give a call and send a video to and be like, what do you think about this? And you ever seen this before? And what am I doing wrong? Am I timing off? Timing's so important when you look at things like force fetch and steadiness and everything else. So, it's just, I wouldn't say self-learned, but, a little bit of studying like I use primarily the West method, and I do kind of deviate from that at some point. But as far as steadiness goes, I really like the way it looks to the dog. It makes sense to the dog. It's pretty simple, and I like to keep things pretty dang simple because they're just dogs, but yeah, it's at first I was putting a lot of pressure on myself, and I'd get discouraged here and there, and now I'm like, oh, I've seen that before. The dog will come around. I'm not, like, need some more birds, or just training's like up and down, and just because you have one great day doesn't mean that dog's going to stay there. It's, they just kind of put things together half-heartedly, and you kind of need some repetition to level some stuff out. But
yeah,
you just get confidence as the years go by.
For sure.
Dogs go by.
With time, the more dogs, the more failures that you learn from. It's like I tell everybody, you just kind of have to learn how to surrender to the process and understand that, like, you got to ride the wave tops. You can go out and have the best training session today, and you're like, man, I'm the best dog trainer in the world. Nobody's got me. And then the next day you're like, I'm shit. Like, there's nothing I can do right now. Right. It's and you just have to learn to take it and understand that, like, as you said, the dog's going to come around, trust the process. You're reading the dog. And as long as you're not forcing it or trying to go too far, too fast, too soon, the dog's going to be just fine. But it's really just kind of getting enough reps under your belt to gain that confidence and understand that, like, you don't have to push so hard to meet a deadline, that the dog's going to get there when it needs to get there.
Yeah. And you can, the more dogs you train, the more you can early on, you can identify a really talented dog versus a dog that you're going to have to probably spend a lot more time with, and that's just part of it. Start training for the public. You don't always get the pick of the litter brought to you,
No.
or the best breeding, and maybe they just didn't know. Like my first dog, I didn't really know what I was looking at either. So, and she was a pretty nice dog, but probably not the quality that I would keep today, So
yeah,
the more dogs you see, the more you realize you see a good dog and you see what great is, So and you really start to kind of see the difference.
Yeah. The dogs that I have today and the dogs that I prefer and like to work with and hunt with, they're kind of completely different than what I thought I wanted when I first started this. And I'm anticipating or forecasting that in another 10 years or so, the dogs that I'm going to have then, I'm going to have a completely different picture in my head than what I currently have now. I'm always trying to strive to figure out something better, a better way of doing it, creating a better dog. To me, that's kind of what drives me. And so, I feel like we're supposed to be always striving for something new. And so in 10 years, if I'm looking back and it's just like, you know what, I've kind of been at this level for a while, then I'm going to be disappointed in myself. It's like, all right, well, how far can we really take this? And then, I don't think that the perfect dog exists, but it's still fun trying to create the perfect dog, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I think I'm a big believer in putting your dog in different terrains, different states, and on different species of birds. Cause just because you have a bang up pheasant dog in South Dakota doesn't mean it's going to be able to handle running blue quail in New Mexico. And maybe that dog's used to working at 50 or 70 yards, and you need that sucker to stretch out to 200, 300 yards to go find some birds. The further you get out west, the more independent of a dog I think you need, just because there's so much space, and, you're not necessarily hitting the sections of corn rows and tailwater pits and stuff like that where the, prime locations, a lot of those quail are just kind of wherever. Yeah. There's really no rhyme or reason where you'll find them. So
yeah,
you gotta put the miles in.
It's interesting, the those of us that travel and we hunt new places and hunt so many different birds, it's easy to try and say that like, oh, a bird's a bird, but each bird kind of brings its own characteristic, whether it's even just a change in terrain and habitat. And it takes time for some of the dogs to learn the differences, right? But they never really do if you don't give them that opportunity. That's not to say that there's nothing wrong with somebody like, hey, if you're a pheasant hunter, that's your thing, that's what you like to do, and you don't really have any desire trying anything, then hey, go create that pheasant dog. But for a lot of people that really want to be able to put their dog on the ground and be able to confidently pursue, fill in the blank with whatever species, the only way to do that is to go travel and put your dog in those scenarios and let them learn, let them fail, let them learn from the failures, and just keep going. There's a lot of value into that.
Yeah, and it can be frustrating watching dogs put birds up, but I mean, you as a handler are just going to interfere with the dog's learning experience. I'm a big believer, leave it between the dog and the bird. And, you know, they're either going to figure it out or they don't. And most of the time they will. And it's going to just happen like a light switch, too. You're just going to start killing birds over one day. And you're like, what happened? Yeah. What happened?
That light bulb, man.
This dog just became a bird dog.
That light bulb goes from off to on just, I mean, quick.
They just figured, hey, I'm tired of chasing these things.
Right.
I'm tired.
Well, I want to come back to your thoughts and process on the West method, because it's funny how so many people will say that like their foundation is essentially the West method in steadiness, but you know, so many of us kind of diverge and kind of put our own little spin or flavor on it, if you will. But going back to the transition into training, I'm curious, you said there were a bunch of learning curves. As somebody who's kind of thinking about putting my shingle out and starting to actually, you know, take on more client dogs in the future, I'm curious, like, what was some of those biggest learning curves that you had when you went to pro training? And it could be anything from dealing with the dogs to even like dealing with the clients or dealing with the paperwork and insurance and all that other stuff. What's some typical advice that you would give somebody that's wanting to hang their shingle out?
I would say, you know, every trainer's going to do something a little different. And I would say that working with another pro, at least for a little while, is probably the best advice I can give you, because you can kind of see how they put dogs in rotation, the steps in between each progression, and really understanding the method and how it pertains to the dog and how they think. And once you can kind of efficiently get a dog steadied or, you know, quote unquote, well broke, and understand to stop on the collar, then I would say kind of start looking into taking some dogs in to really kind of test. That's the only way to do it, is jump in and do it. But I kind of took some dogs of buddies that, you know, didn't have a lot of pressure on me to put it on a timeline or anything like that. And I was like, you know what, I'm kind of you get kind of efficient at it, because it's like anything else. If you run a construction company and you underbid it, and now you're spending too much time on the job, you're going to lose money, right? And you're going to starve to death. So really, you really just got to kind of, you know, get a routine down. It's all about efficiency and spending the right amount of time with the dog, and not overload yourself in the beginning. You know, have kind of a nest egg there. You can take 4 or 5 dogs in and work with them. You can work 4 or 5 dogs all day long. It's if you really had to, you know. So, but yeah, you just got to see different types of dogs. They all think different. Yeah. Even though you're using the same method, it's all just a little different.
Yeah. And it should be. I mean, you know, if I've said it so often in recent episodes, like, we can all agree that every dog is different, every handler is different, but then so many people want to approach every single dog in the same way. But yet we're still acknowledging that every dog's different. So it's like, you know, you have your process, you have your method, but you need to still be able to actually train the dog in front of you based on what they're telling you.
Yeah, and, you know, I run into this with force fetch a lot. You know, some dogs just roll right through my program, my steps, and then others just kind of start doing some weird stuff, and you just got to kind of look back. Okay, like, what's going to make sense to this dog? What can I do to make sense of this dog? I actually talked to a buddy today on the way up about this, and I was like, here's an example. I had a dog that I had collar condition, was picking up bumpers on the table perfectly, knew how to turn the collar off, reaching to fetch, and I put it on the ground. It will not pick up a bumper on the ground, even right in front of it. It would just kind of paw at it and just kind of, it knew what to do, but acted like it couldn't pick it up, right? I put the bumper on a place board. I sent it to the place board, and the dog picked it up, did the whole process cleanly. So we just started doing that 100 times, and then I just took it away, and it was like the dog didn't even notice it was gone.
Yeah.
Just weird stuff. Like, I don't know why that dog would not pick it up in the dirt or the grass, but place board is like, hey, this is cleaner. I don't know. I don't know. But it worked.
Some dogs just
kind of, you got to get creative.
Yeah, some dogs just do some crazy things. But so many people in that position, especially like, let's say you force fetch 1 or 2 dogs, and we hear like, well, hey, the dog knows what to do, make them do it. And I mean, yeah, if you've overlaid the collar, you can make them do it. But to your point, like, is it not better to just kind of get creative and think outside the box, and we can kind of circumvent that to where maybe we're not bringing in so much conflict into that situation to where, like, yeah, we can make them do it, but at the end of the day, we want them to do it too.
I will try any other avenue I can possibly think of before I try to pick the least pressure road to get the job done. I like to see the dog enjoying the job and wagging its tail the whole time. And some dogs are just not going to be that dog, and they may just absolutely hate retrieving, and it's going to be a whole true force fetch the whole way and will fight you the whole way. But I think for the most part, a lot of dogs want to please, and if you can get it done with the least possible pressure, I think that's the way to go.
Yeah.
But you always want to have that tool when you need it.
Yeah.
Because you will get refusals, time to time. So, and
some people listening to this might be a little surprised to hear that from a wire hair breeder, right? Wire hairs are usually, it's like, hey, there's enough drive to do this.
Bad rap. They have a bad rap for being this tough, gritty, gnarly, just a-hole of a dog, and that's really not my experience. I think there's a handful, there's some in every breed, I'm sure, but I like cooperative dogs, and that's really something I strive for in my dogs, is some cooperation. And if they're a little bit softer, I'm fine with it. As long as the drive is there and willing to work is there, a great soft dog is easy to train for me. I love a soft dog.
Yeah.
As long as they are willing to work. Some dogs are just soft and stubborn, and that's terrible.
Yeah.
That's a bad mixture.
I mean, I want to hear your definition on soft, because I have my thoughts on this, but to your point, man, I would say the majority of wire hairs and even draughts that I've come across have been some of the biggest babies. Now, there's been a couple that I've come across, I'm like, man, like, you could bang your head up against that brick wall and the dog's head would go through the brick wall. But the bulk of them that
wagging its tail.
Yeah, but the bulk of them, man, it's just like, to your point, man, like they're eager to please. Like they're just super biddable dogs, and quote unquote, some people might call soft, but I don't know. I have my own thoughts on soft. I want to hear what would you define a soft dog as?
I'll take one of my own dogs, for example. My Lori dog. I would call her a little bit soft in the fact that when I was steadying her up, I mean, I was using a bunch of collar pressure, and she just kind of, surprisingly, like, she just kind of shake it off. She'd always get those 2 or 3 steps in, and I'm like, what's the deal? I started picking her up and setting her back, and it ruined her day. She hates getting her hands, but just physically putting her back 3 feet where she was, and she'd just cower down and kind of look at you, and then she'd be perfect the rest of the session. She's like, like, so is she soft in the sense that it almost makes them more trainable? They don't put up a fight necessarily, and some dogs are softer in different ways. Like, she can handle the collar fine, but she does not like to be physically moved. And so, I mean, I really don't use the collar and steadiness with her at all. I just kind of pick her up, set her back, and she gets the hint.
Yeah.
Pretty quick.
Man, it's funny you say they're almost, being quote unquote soft almost makes them easier to train. And I would kind of piggyback off that and agree to some extent. Obviously, what other people consider soft changes, but in my experience, the dogs I'm around that other people try and label as soft, it's like I'm looking at it, I'm like, man, the dog can take pressure fine. It's just how you're training them. It's almost like I say, it's almost like some of these quote unquote soft dogs are just more intelligent. Like they need a reason why to do it or want to do it.
Right.
And so many people fall back into that camp of just make them do it. Show them. They know the standard, make them do it. And some dogs, like, they just don't operate under compulsion the same way as other dogs. Sometimes you have to, this kind of comes full circle to what you're just talking about, get creative and come about it a different way than just hammering them on the e-collar. And it's just like, if the dog doesn't respond to the e-collar, instead of thinking of a new way or an alternative way, they just start cranking up on that e-collar. Then the dog shuts down, and then they're labeled soft. And it's like, man, if you stopped at the level 3 or 4 on the e-collar and didn't go up to 7 or put on a second collar, maybe we could have avoided this whole shutdown.
More electricity. That's the answer, right?
Yeah. It's the fact Garmin doesn't go high enough on the collar that we have to go that we have to resolve.
Well, I just kind of looked at it like she's a pretty intelligent dog and she wants to please, but I just don't think that she really understood that taking those 2 or 3 steps was a bad thing in that regard. So, putting her back to exactly where she was really just kind of made sense for her. And, we never looked back. Mm-hmm. And she's one of the most reliable dogs that I have as far as withholding her training. She's not a dog I have to train constantly all the time. I can put her on the ground. I pretty much know what she's going to do. And I realized my first dog, or my Cora dog, she taught me that I wanted more cooperation in my dogs, because she is just kind of a knothead. And if you don't stay on her, she's gonna try to get away with something. And that's just kind of how she is. So leading up to when I took her to the Invitational, we were training all the time, because I just knew if I let up,
she's going to fall down
quick.
Yeah.
And that's just the way she is. She just needs that consistency, and she thrives off it. She thrives off pressure. Some dogs you want to leave alone. She's not one of them. You need to stay on her. And
if you give her an inch, she's going to take 10 miles probably.
Oh yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, and she's one of the, I've killed a bunch of birds over in 14 states, and she's a great wild bird dog. But when it just comes to the game, she was a lot to handle, with the technical stuff that didn't, the perfect heel and the, just all that kind of stuff. She was a tough one to get through that, because she hates heeling. She's like, her feet are on fire. She wants to go. And so she's got all that drive built up, and, just doing that boring stuff just really wasn't her. It's not her vibe, so.
Yeah. Well, as far as the heel, and was she drifting off away from you, or was she surging forward? What did you do to counteract that and get past the Invitational? Because heel, man, a lot of people struggle with a heel.
Yeah. And so here's the thing. I will never, within my power, I will never fail a utility test for heeling ever again. So my first 2 utility tests I ever ran were with my Cora dog and a dog I no longer own, but I ran them both in the same day. We rock and rolled all day long. We did everything perfect. We start heeling up to the marked retrieve and the remain by blind, and Cora was young. She was 2.5, and we were not making excuses. This is what happened. We were about 4th in line, and so she hears all the gunshots going off for all the other dogs, and she's just on fire. She's not listening. I don't exist. I should have taken her back to the truck and calmed her down, heeled her around, made her listen. But they're like, you need to stay here. Now I know better. I'm like, I just need to be there when I'm ready to run.
Right.
So, but anyway, she gets a 1 in heel, and my Kai dog did the same thing. He got a 2 in heel. So I got a prize 3 and a prize 2 on heeling alone. That was the only knock on the whole. I got a 200 prize 2 and a 193 prize 3. I'm like, even the judges were like, this breaks our heart, man. Your dog's great. They're freaking heel. And my buddies probably still they're going to laugh if they listen to this, but they made fun of me for a long time. They gave me a lot of crap about it. which is fine because I learned my lesson.
You're not alone,
threes
man.
and fours are the only acceptable scores on healing.
You're not alone, man. I know plenty of people that have done that. My buddy Scott, he took the scorecard because same thing. He had a max score all the way until a heel, and I think if I remember correctly, he may have gotten a 0 in heel, 0 or 1, and he has it framed up in his kennel with just Sharpie written out, "Never again," and it's his reminder day in day out that like we can do all of this cool stuff, but the small stuff is where it gets you.
I didn't spend a lot of time with it, in full honesty, because I wasn't worried about it. I was like, my dog's heel. Well, now I'm like, I have someone start throwing pigeons and stuff when I'm walking the dog on heel. I'm like, I'm on a bulletproof freaking heel. I'll shoot my cap gun. I'm doing all kinds of crazy stuff to like prepare myself the best I possibly can. Stuff happens, but dogs get distracted when you make a turn or whatever. But that was bad. I had to freaking crank on that dog all the way down the back when they had the healing stakes still, and.
Is that really all you did? Just start drilling it with distractions and proofing it some more, or did you like switch your process altogether? Talk to me about that.
I wouldn't say I switched my process altogether. I just spent a lot more time, making it more rock solid with lead, without lead, doing all kinds of turns and, walking up to the water, because you always heel up to the water in a testing situation. They always get excited when they see the water, right? So I'll heel up to the water, turn around, heel them back 3 or 4 times before I ever do a water retrieve. So they're not anticipating anything. Test day, I got the dog out 15 minutes before we're going, and I'm just on them, heeling with either a prong collar or even just a regular old slip lead, just making sure that we're at eye contact, they're focused on me kind of thing. Like I'm the only thing that matters right now. You're healing with me. I'll let the dog so typically on a test day, you run a duck search before the healing and the remain by blind and stuff. I let the dog drag me to the duck search. I want them to want to go. I'm not going to get on them right before I want them to go across water. So yeah, I let them get away with murder all day, but I kind of get on them right before the event. So it's made a big difference.
Yeah.
It's just the handling error, training error, you name it, and that's how you learn though. I learned best the hard way, apparently. So.
we all learn best through failure, man. And I mean, it's just chalk it up to one of the learning curves or learning experiences. I'm curious, back to the West method. Where did the West method kind of fall in with you? Was it through one of the trainers that you're kind of learning under originally, or did you kind of fall onto the book? Kind of walk me through your how you came to be or came in contact with the West method overall.
Before I ever even steadied up a dog, I was like, how do you do this? And just kind of, I was all over the place. I always see photos with dogs with flank collars on, with them tied to a post, just all kinds of place
on a barrel with an elevator on it and standing on your left
just
leg.
Throwing pigeons at them, let them hang themselves, let them learn, let them teach themselves kind of thing. And I'm just like, I don't really like that, and there's I've been to a Kyle Huff clinic where they use the ramps and all that. And, it all works. You will always it'll all work if you get, if you put the time in. But with the West method, it was a little more finesse to it, which I really like. And you spend a lot of one-on-one time with the dog, and doesn't take a lot of pressure once you get point across. And that's what I really like. I don't really care for the flank collars. I will use them in certain situations. If I get a really steppy dog and they just don't care about the neck kind of thing. But like I said, train the dog in front of you, right? But for the most part, I just enjoy the whole process of how, you teach the dog to stop and stand with just a little yank of a leather collar, and it kind of just gives them a little nick on the collar, and then you overlay the e-collar, and then if you feel like it, add a whoa, a verbal for trials and testing and everything. At least you have a way to stop your dog, right, when they do make a mistake. So, but Belinda DeLaby in southeastern Oklahoma, I learned a lot from her. I asked her a ton of questions years ago when I was first learning about it. And then I went to a clinic out at her place, and I realized I knew the method a lot better than I thought I did when I went to that clinic, because I didn't really learn anything when I went there, but it was a good reassurance. I'm glad I went, because I'm like, oh, I am doing everything right, and so yeah, it just made sense to me, and it works for me. And I got friends that use the what most NABDA folks probably do is with the ramps, and stopping the dog on the ramp and all that, and that works. I think it's a lot of pressure on a dog early on, which kind of made me
yeah.
I prefer what I did. It's just a preference. Like I said, least amount of pressure possible is my goal.
Yeah.
I like them to look good.
Yeah.
When I see a dog with their tail flagging, or tail when you start walking up to a dog and their tail just drops, I'm like, well, so they know your pressure is what it is, So I try to, you keep your mouth shut. They don't associate you with pressure so much. And that's hard for even me. I catch myself talking to the dog probably a little more than I should. So
I think we can all be in that. Yeah, we're all in that camp to where we have a session where just shut your mouth and just train the dog. But it's funny you said that it's just like it just felt right to you. And I go back to I interviewed Martha Greenlee, rote training with Mo, and she just said the same thing. The Westies, as she referred to them. The method just the method just kind of finds them, right? Like, it's just, to your point, like all of these other processes, all of these other methods, they're proven, like they'll work. But to your point, I kind of found the same thing. I saw a lot of the same seminars, the same people, and you go to NABDA and stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, it works. But to your point, I'm like, man, it's a lot of pressure right up front, and you're trusting that the dog's going to come out through the other end, and again, almost all of them end up doing. But it's just like, all right, I feel like there's a better way, and you use the word finesse. That's the way I use it too. It's just like, man, I feel like I get further, maybe not faster, but at least more efficient, or maybe more solidly by the time I get through it, by just kind of going at the pace of the dog with a little bit more finesse, rather than just like, hey, line them up and let's make it happen. And nothing wrong with it, but I appreciated the more methodical and just kind of even paced approach of the West method. It just made sense to me.
I feel like I can avoid a lot of problems along the way and not have to try to fix problems later after I got this dog steady, but now it flags, or now it, just doing whatever, it's cowering a little bit. And like, I know how to avoid all that, and that's what I like. I don't want to have to clean up my mess down the road. So,
right. If we can avoid the problem, then we don't have a problem to fix later. It's pretty simple.
Exactly. Yeah. Try to keep it simple, and, just go at the dog's pace, and you'll be all right. If you look at the head and the tail of the dog, it tells you exactly what they're feeling and thinking. So,
yeah. So I'm curious, if the listeners want to like a deep dive on the West method. I've done a few episodes. I've done it with Martha. Even Mo himself has come on. They can go check out those episodes. But I'm curious. You mentioned that like sometimes with the right dog in the right situation, maybe you need to go to a flank collar or adjust your process. I'm assuming these are client dogs. Talk to me about like what you're seeing in a dog that you're sitting there like, all right, we need to change things up. What's a scenario that maybe you're like, all right, we need to pull out the flank collar or try a different approach here? Is there like a common denominator here, or has it just been kind of a different reason or different scenario altogether every time you've had to do that?
I can think of 2 times I've done it in the last 3 years that I've put a flank collar on a dog. And one was the dog had previously had yard work done with the flank collar.
That's what I was curious about. Yeah.
I went with that, and he did a good job. The dog knew exactly what to do, when he felt the collar. Another one was I worked with the dog from a blank slate. No, I wouldn't say that. He was at a trainer before, but the dog, he told me the dog knew how to whoa and everything else. And he was just had loose feet. He was just steppy. He could not stop moving his feet. And after about a month of me doing my process, and he just wanted to kind of creep on birds, didn't care if you put them up, etc., I went to a flank collar with him, and it worked. It was that dog's key. It was that dog's solution. But I try everything I know to do before that. Just, it's my comfort zone, and like, I'm like, oh, I don't know how tight to put the flank collar on. I don't do this, and like, I'm just like, is it too tight, too loose? Like, nothing's worse than a loose collar, right? Like, so, like, but I just don't like running 2 collars on a dog. It's a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
And, so they handle off one and then, whoa and go. So I just don't know.
Right. Well, and I mean,
like, I'm just like, I got 2 remotes here. And
to your point, man, just, you said at the very start of this, it's like just trying to keep it simple. And like, if it's simple to us and it's clear to us, I feel like that clarity travels down the check cord to the dog. And there's nothing wrong with the flank collar. It's been around forever. When done right, if you know what you're doing, it's fine. But me personally, I prefer not to have to do multiple points of contact on the dog. Like, if I can do everything around the neck and live on just the neck, to your point, I'm not having to lug a second collar around. I'm not having to worry about like, oh man, did I forget to swap the collar button on the remote? Like, oh, I hit the flank collar and I meant to hit the neck, and vice versa. It's and I know some people, they'll actually go to 2 different hand remotes to prevent that, right? Like the one on the right will be the neck, one on the left will be the flank, fill in the blank. But to your point, man, there's already enough stuff going on in the field at any given time. You start adding in birds, you start adding in launchers, and you got your e-collar remotes, and then you're carrying a pistol, and then you have if you're still fully dressed on the check cord and the pinch collar, like there's a lot of stuff that's demanding of your hands. I don't want a second e-collar remote. I don't want to have to worry about switching to a different remote or a different collar on the one remote.
And you're adding a step if you transition from the flank to the neck.
Yes. Then
you're just kind of adding the whole step for the dog, another thing for the dog to kind of figure out. And it's just, that just works for me.
It makes sense for the right method. Obviously, the flank collar, I would say, you might agree with me or not, probably the better known method that it stems from is the Smith method, but that's because they have the woe post, and the woe post creates that point of contact, right, and they just continue that on. But eventually they're getting away from the belly collar and going to the neck as well. And to your point, it just removes another step. So it's like, with what we do and kind of grounded in the West method, we don't really create that second point of contact to begin with, so we never have to like cycle off of it. So it just makes more sense to me. But I have plenty of buddies that, man, they're Smith junkies, right? Like, it makes sense to them just like the West method makes sense to us, and that's why I think it's so like imperative that anybody training their own dogs figure out what makes sense and what approach just connects with them, because it's going to be different for everybody.
Yeah. And, I do some one-on-ones with people that are interested in learning the kind of steps that I do. And pretty much at any given time, I can take out a dog I started working with 2 weeks ago. That's 4 weeks in and 6 or 8 weeks into the steadiness. And they can kind of see the progression, in each kind of little stage. And, maybe this dog's been on a check cord for a month. And that's another thing that I learned the hard way, is I got in a hurry to take that check cord off.
Dude,
it's like, what? It doesn't cost anything. I'm just going to keep that on until I know.
Well, man, it's hard when your initial thought, or at least mine, I shouldn't say yours, but the way I was thinking about it is kind of, I was taught in the NAVDA program, like a 20-foot check cord was only good if you cut it up into 4 or 5 foot leashes. And
yeah,
it's hard when you first go into it, trusting that you having that check cord isn't going to rob the hunt or the desire from the dog in the field, because it's just so controlled. You're essentially just controlling and driving the field. But when done right, like, it doesn't rob the hunt or the search from the dog. Now, if you go out there and you're just yanking on the check cord incessantly and never stopping, then you can probably rob the dog a little bit. But the check cord, it took me a while to kind of accept that. Like, I avoided it for the longest. Like, the Smith or the West method made sense to me, but I was so reluctant to go to the check cord. I probably could have started doing this like a year or two earlier, but the check cord, it was an aversive to me almost. Like I didn't want to have to deal with the check cord. I'm like, I can just do it with an e-collar. I don't need a check cord.
Yeah. And it's boring, right? Like all the check cord work. It really is. And especially when you got 4 or 5 dogs that are just learning. So you're just check cording dogs all morning into birds, and which isn't it, but you're creating that situation. You're creating a successful situation for the dog to learn, to make the dog successful. And then once they realize what you want, overlay your collar, put brakes on them, and then you're good to go, you know? Mm-hmm. So it's really just, you know, sometimes less is more. And sometimes, you know, like I had to take a few steps back with the dog a couple weeks ago, and it just wasn't ready for the check cord to come off. And I thought he was. Turned that sucker loose, and it was it knew.
he knew he doesn't have control over me now.
Yeah, so my e-collar overlay was not bulletproof, that's for sure.
Yeah. So when you go back, man, like, are you just going back to the previous step you were at, or do you just kind of hit reset and go all the way back to the beginning? Because I know a lot of guys like, hey, if I thought we were here and we weren't, I'm just peace of mind. I'm going to go all the way back to the very beginning and kind of run through the whole thing again.
Most of the time, I know exactly where I rushed myself, and a lot of the time is because I had a really good day with the dog when I'm overlaying the e-collar, teaching the dog to, you know, when I pull the leather lead, they stop, and I'm overlaying it with the e-collar, and I stop them 5 or 6 times with the e-collar alone. And I'm like, this dog knows exactly what I want. Won't move. I can't get the dog to move until I tap it on the head. We're good. Next day I turn it loose. It's forgotten all of that, apparently. So, you know, one good day does not mean the dog has retained everything. You know, some dogs are like Groundhog Day. They just forget everything they did yesterday. And you know, the dummies, the little knucklehead dogs out there, they need a little bit more, you know, they got to beat it into them a little bit more, so to speak.
Yeah. You got to repeat the behavior enough for it to become habit, essentially.
Yep.
Yeah. So I got to ask, with the West method, do you use whoa?
Absolutely.
Yep.
I do not. I might give them a very I do not stop a dog verbally. Like if I flush a bird and they kind of start moving, it's all collar. I stop the dog with the collar. I might give them a soft little warning as I walk by the dog to flush the bird. Just a soft little whoop and do my thing. But primarily, I do not want to be the reason that dog stops on birds. I want it to think that, hey, this is just what God is making me do. You know, I don't want to be the reason. So I want to be able to stop the dog verbally for when I don't have a collar on. But whoa is just handy. I can take a dog out of the truck and tell it whoa and grab my gun, and then okay, now we're ready to go, and I'd send the dog. It's not just running off the wrong direction, or, you know, just it's convenient. I don't teach a lot of my dogs to sit, so whoa is kind of like, hey, stand here for a photo or whatever. You know, it's just handy.
Strike a pose.
Whoa at the dog box. Whoa at your kennel. You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just manners.
So you pretty much use it more for just manners and stay, essentially, more so than you do the around birds, right? You know, I think that's the misconception is, you know, I mean, you even talk to Martha and these other folks, like, more or less, they say don't use whoa because it's unnecessary if you train correctly. Like, you know, you have the point of contact and they're always around birds, but it prevents, if you tell people that you're never allowed to use whoa, then they're never going to be in the field constantly saying whoa over and over and over and over and over again, right? That's a big pet peeve of mine, is like their dog's frozen on point and all you hear is the handler just never stop saying whoa. It gets kind of old and it just becomes watered down, so that when you actually maybe possibly need it one day, you don't have an e-collar on or something, you don't have it available to you anymore.
Yeah. Well, you know, and they're walking up to their dog that's on point and they're 80, 100 yards away and they're like, whoa, whoa. Running up to the dog like, whoa. And I'm like, the dog is whoaing.
It's not moving.
Like, if it's going to mess up, let it mess up. You know, like, it's never going to learn if you just keep on screaming at it. So, And I get clients that bring me dogs like, yeah, get a whoa on it, steady it up, and I'll show the dog, and I'll never say anything to the dog and shoot birds over it. It's steady, and like, well, you didn't teach it whoa. I guess I could. I forgot,
Yeah. We can, just say whoa while it's doing all of the other stuff without needing it.
Was it broke? Yes. Like, I don't know.
Oh man, I love it. Well, man, I'm not going to keep you too much longer. I know you're stopped on the road. You're headed up to North Dakota, but I do have to ask, I mean, this time of year, you're from Texas, man, training in the heat, it sucks. Like, I mean, there's just no way around it. You have to make do the best you can. But I'm curious, when you're a pro trainer and you have a timeline and you have somebody bringing you dogs and they're expecting results and having a dog ready for the fall, what's some of the tricks of the trade, the tips that you can provide for working dogs in the heat, where you're actually getting productive work? Because, I mean, anybody that's never really tried working steadiness or on birds when it's 90 to 100 degrees outside, it's not the most enjoyable experience. So I'm curious, what's some tips that you've accrued over the years that you've been doing this?
Take more force fetch dogs. No. So I have been trying to do that. I want to take more retrieving dogs in the summer months versus steadiness field work, so to speak. But efficiency is key. You get up at 5:30, go catch your birds, load up dogs. I personally don't do a lot of training at my house. I got some grounds about 15 minutes away, and so I load up my buggy and load up dogs, and off we go. And the Polaris just helps me get birds planted in 2 minutes. We make a quick, some days I'll only make a little 15-minute loop with the dog, but we had 4 or 5 bird contacts, and if they need to be ran again, then I'll just come back to them at the end of the rotation, run them again. But you can get a lot of work. I think I worked 6 or 7 dogs in less than 2 hours on birds, and as long as you're efficient in what you're doing and the dog understands, you don't need to run a dog for 30 minutes. You really don't. And let's face it, when you wake up and it's 83 degrees, by the time the sun comes up, you're at 90 real quick, and then you're at 107 real fuel, so efficiency is key, and just be, as productive as you can. Some days I don't get to a dog because of some reason or another, but but they're just first on line the next day. So it's the right equipment, and have a process that works for you. I catch a bunch of birds, so all I have to do is go to my little box and load up a bag and go set traps and go plant quail, and off I go again. So it's quick turnaround.
What about safety precautions? Do you have like a hard set rule, like a magic number that you just kind of draw the line in the sand to say, we're not going to run dogs if it's above this level?
No, but I mean, like I said, I get out there as early as I can. My box it's insulated with fans, and they stay pretty cool in there, and they drink water before and after their run. I've got 3 ponds on my property that they can swing around to take a dunk, and then off we go again. And just I watch them. If I think they're panting way too hard for 5 minutes on the ground, something might be up. So, just look at the dog in front of you. That's the best thing I can say is watch the dog. And most of them are pretty good for a little 15-minute run, as long as they get a good drink of water afterwards and dunk in the tank, and So aside from, quick, fast, and efficient.
Yeah. Aside from the bird work, I know like conditioning. I know you do some of the kayaking and stuff. You just do that like in the evening times? Just another way of getting them out and stretching their legs and knocking the rust off the bolts, or what?
Yeah, it's I can swim them for 5 or 10 minutes across my pond, and they get out and cool off. And because even that water gets pretty hot.
It's a wet blanket.
If the water's at 85 degrees, yeah, so they don't really cool off until they get out of the water, but it's just it's a good way. So a lot of times my dogs don't get ran, so I can take my 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever, and just off we go for a swim, let them go do whatever. And my dogs are pretty well used to it. I know them pretty well, so they don't really overheat. I can run them from every 200 yards, there's a pond at my place. So, they swim, and then off we run, and they dunk into another tank. And so that's kind of how, when it comes to conditioning in August, that's the really only way you can get it done. Evening time and running pond to pond.
But I mean, you got to do it. I mean, especially with hunting season. I mean, early season, especially starting in September, like you got to keep the dogs in shape. I mean, there's no way around it. Whether you're doing it at nighttime or you just got to get creative and make it happen, because 2 or 3 pounds extra on the dog. When you're talking about a 40, 50 pound dog, sometimes that's a big chunk of percentage in their body weight. But I don't think a lot of people fully realize what 3 to 5 pounds can do to a dog.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, I like to keep my dogs pretty thin in the summer. It just helps them stay cooler, more comfortable. And it's less weight you have to take off in August whenever you start and get ready for Montana or whatever, and for sharptails. You got to lower the calorie of food that you're feeding, and they do a lot better on it in the summer, in the hot months. Because, like, I lower the amount to, I'm like scary. I'm like, how are you still holding weight at a cup and a half of food, but like they look good. So, but they're just not active, like whether they were active in their kennel or just running around in the yard or whatever. Now they just kind of hang out. So they're not getting their steps in, so to speak, Yeah.
Well, you said a second ago, sometimes your dogs don't get run. And I guess it's kind of the old saying of, like, I guess the professional painter's house is the one that needs painting the most, or the mechanic's car is the one that's always broken down. How do you balance that out between, if you got a kennel full of client dogs, but you have your own dogs and your own program and your own foundation that you have to build, and you have to go test, and you want to go hunt as well? Like, how have you found to best balance that out to where you said yourself, if it's hot and it's in the summer, you got an hour and a half to 2 hours to run these dogs, you got a full lineup of client dogs. Where do you get your dogs running in?
So I'm still figuring that out. For example, I had 2 of my dogs in for a utility test this spring, plus a client dog that was out of my program. And I had to drop one of them because she needed a little bit more work and I didn't have the time to give her. So my dogs get ran the least, but luckily I feel like I know them pretty well, and I don't necessarily need the extra time to spend with them. If I can toss them in, at the end of the day, I can usually get what work I need done with them. But yeah, I had to pull a dog because I just didn't have the time. And, she was a young dog, and I just didn't want to rush her. She just turned 2. I was like, I'll run her next year, or even this fall, maybe. But, I think she needs another bird season, and take her duck hunting, and I think that'll go a long way with her confidence wise. So that was just a call I made, but I really just didn't want to rush it. I didn't want to throw her. I don't like to put a dog into a test that I know they're not doing really good work,
Yeah.
So that you look at, as a pro, you're like, oh, what's this guy's handling, record look like? Or his dog, why does his dog just, destroy this test and, just fall apart? So yeah, if I don't think they're ready, I'm not going to run them. There's no point. So.
Yeah, it's a balancing act. It's like, you want to run them. It's good for business, but at the same time, if you're going into a test like hoping, and to your point, it doesn't really go the exact way that you're hoping, that can be detrimental to your business and livelihood, more so than even being successful on that one test in a lot of ways.
I think a lot of trainers get caught up in some ego, and they're like, I've got to push this dog through this test at a certain age, and et cetera, or just, maybe the dog's not ready, it's not mentally there, and they're just going to keep pushing the dog, keep pushing it, just either make the client happy or themselves happy. I don't know, but I'm not. I'm big on letting the dog grow up, and when they're ready, they're ready. I don't need to set any young dog records by any means. So
yeah, and clearly you do the NAVDA testing, but have you screwed around with any of the trialing or shoot to retrieve stuff yet?
I've dabbled in. I've done probably a handful of the shoot to retrieve, and I've ran a few dogs in some puppies and derbies and AKC walking trials. I've actually ran a dog in the NBHA trial too, just to try it out, see what it was all about. I do the AKC hunt test too. But not many people, that's not real big where I'm at. So, and the testing season's so short here, you know, like people can up north can test right now still, like all the way through like July. So, I just don't have that option.
Yeah. Well, man, I know you got to hit the road here in a minute, so I don't want to keep you too much longer. But, you know, at the end of all these episodes, what I like to do is kind of just throw it to the guest way and just kind of ask them, you know, what's something in this conversation that I probably should have asked you that I didn't?
Oh, I don't know. A little bit about hunting season, you know. I really enjoyed your I listened to your podcast about Montana, and that really just lit a fire in me to go up there the next year. I was like, oh, man, of course, you know, the past few years, everyone's been talking about, you know, North Dakota, Montana, etc. But yeah, I just had to go experience it for myself.
Did it live up to expectations?
100%. You know, I'll do it a little bit different this year. I'm not going to take 14 dogs like I did last year. That kind of took a little bit of the fun out of it. But
that's a lot of work, man. 14 dogs.
You know, and I felt bad if I didn't get a dog ran that day. So. And, you know, you just watch all these young dogs put up birds all day. And I'm like, I want to take out one of my older dogs and go shoot a limited grouse in about an hour, you know?
Yeah. It doesn't take long up there, man.
It just made my day.
Yeah. In a good year, It doesn't take long. But yeah, man, I'm with you, man. That was a special trip. Just one of those that, like, you go on all these trips with high hopes and you know, you try not to have any expectations. You try and just keep it hopeful. But that was the one that, you know, we got up there and it just lived up in really all of anything you could imagine as an upland hunt or an upland trip. It was like, it met all expectations. Yeah. It was just awesome. I would love to get back up there again soon.
You know, I saw about 2 coveys of huns before I realized what a hun was, because I had never seen a hun before. We actually walked up a single and it flew off, and I was like, I think that was something. Like,
it was a bird. It had wings.
And then my dog pointed a covey of it, and I was like, oh, I'm shooting at those next time. Yeah. I think those are huns.
Yep. No, dude, huns, man, they are sneaky becoming one of my favorite birds to hunt. Like, I love huns. There's something special, man.
I'm a quail hunter, you know, by large, but those huns really kind of I really enjoyed them because, like, the grouse are fun. I like any covey birds. I like covey birds, and the grouse are fun, but it's like shooting a flying chicken. You know, they're not fast. Right. The huns were a little bit more challenging, and they had big coveys, you know, and it's like, it was just exciting. It's like a big quail to me.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I call huns like the Yankee quail. They're just northern quail. That's all they are. And but they're
I didn't expect them to be so ratty, though. They ran a lot more than I thought they would.
All right. Is it
a lot of times? Not every time, but
yeah, I didn't come across any runners, but it's hit or miss. Like, some days they would hold really tight, and then like the next, like, you would have one day to where you're going up, and it's just like I don't walk up on my dog on point. I try and circle around as often as I can if the situation allows it. But it's like, there's been a couple times where I'm getting pretty close to the dog. I'm like, all right, there's no bird here, or it's holding extremely tight. And then sure enough, the covey gets up. But then the next day, the dog goes on point, and it's like, as soon as you get the notification or notice the dog's on point, they flush, and it's like the dog didn't move. It's just, you know, I don't know if it's the conditions or what. I haven't had enough reps on them to start kind of piecing together the anecdotal evidence or experiences. But it's just like, man, to me, that's kind of what's intriguing about them. It's like every day you come across them, but they're different birds every day, in my experience.
I think it's pretty cover dependent. You know, you find them in that thinner cover, and they're going to kind of take off on you. I mean, I was walking 50 or 60 yards past my dog.
Yeah.
And I'm looking back at my dog. I'm like, man, they look pretty serious. And I just keep walking, and eventually they get up, or, you know, the dog will relocate and pin them down again. I'm like, oh, they're trying to get away, you know? Yeah. So it took me a little bit to figure those out. I like that challenge, that, you know, the chase, which, you know, a lot of times you don't get that. You get that with the roosters, right? Like the little point and relocate, the chase of it all. They like to play games, but, those huns reminded me of like blue quail sometimes.
Yeah.
The way they just take off running.
Yeah, scale quail, man. When I went down to Arizona a couple years ago, those birds really impressed me too. It was funny. Like I went down there for some reason. I had this like hierarchy to where I thought I had Gamble's quail at the top of my list. Then I had Mearns. Then I had scale. And I left there like with the exact opposite, to where the scalies were on top, Mearns in the middle, and Gamble's at the bottom. And it's just like each bird was completely different and unique. But like the scalies, man, they just stole my heart when I was down there. They were so much fun.
Yeah, I can't remember where I saw the T-shirt, but it's a scaled quail with Nikes on. It said "Run fast or die flying," and I was like, "That is so accurate," because they do not want to fly, until you get them broke up. And I was like, I think they're smart and they're survivors, and I kind of respect that about them. And I will say the Mearns, the first hunt on Mearns was rough. I couldn't hit a freaking Mearns quail to save my. They just hook around those oak trees, And I'm like, I finally started hitting them. I was like, man, it was embarrassing. It was like, it took me 5 cubbies to finally hit a quail. And then they're like, and you shot a hen? The one you shot was a hen? I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm not picking out the male. I was just trying to kill one.
Well, hey, you're ahead of me, man. I haven't gotten to shoot one. So I went on a few walks on Mearns, but every time I was carrying the shotgun, we didn't come across any of them. It was every time I had the camera on me that we got into them. And then, of course, the other guys in the party weren't shooting worth a darn. So man, I've been into some pretty cool places. I've hunted some pretty unique birds. I mean, everything from ptarmigan and blue grouse in Colorado and what have you. But man, the Mearns country, like, it's just freaking gorgeous. Like, it's hard to describe.
Yeah,
like,
it's beautiful.
It's just freaking awesome.
I feel like that's like the only part of the country that exists, and you can't find that anywhere
It
else.
almost felt like it wasn't supposed to be there. Like, you're down kind of in the low desert chasing gambles and scalies, and it's like, all right, it's the desert. Like, you kind of like this kind of fits with what I had in my head. And then you kind of go up into the Mearns Mountains, and you get up there, and you're just like, I don't feel like this is supposed to be in Arizona. Like, it just didn't feel what I had in my head, but it's just gorgeous, man. It's like there's a few places and hunts that I've been on that, like, you just walk and you're just constantly looking around, looking at the terrain. Like, man, it's just drop dead gorgeous out there. Yeah,
those birds are so different too, to me anyway, in my opinion. They hold so tight, and once you get a dog that kind of figures them out, you could take forever to get to them, and they're going to just sit there like a pen-raised bird. But when they take off, they are probably the fastest bird I've ever seen on the wing, and they hold so freaking tight. We had a little water break. We were out there walking, and we were like, okay, which way do we want to go back, circle back to the truck, etc. Probably 5 or 10 minutes, and dogs are panting. We water the dogs, and we were like, hey, let's go. Guns are open. We took about 10 steps.
Yeah. 6
birds get up. They were sitting there the whole time. The dogs were just sitting there panting next to us, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" I felt like such an idiot. I was like,
"Man,
how do they do it?"
I was just gonna tell the story of my buddy Harold. We were out there, and I have it on camera somewhere. I think so many of this stuff that I have on camera, I've never even like done anything with. I need to go through a lot of the stuff, but I remember vividly.
Like the GoPro? Is that what you're talking?
GoPro, and man, I have a love-hate relationship with the GoPro. I wear it sometimes, but I would prefer like a real camera. But I hate putting the GoPro on my head. Yeah. But, it's just like, especially if you're by yourself, it's just like you want to preserve those memories. So it's a catch-22. Like, I would love to never put one on my head again. But at the same time, like, I do want some of those memories. So it's just like, all right, I do the best I can with what I've got. But my buddy Harold, he was he was on the struggle bus. Like, he was just, normally he's a dead eye. He hits everything. And like, man, we're in this Mearns, and we got into him pretty good on this walk. And there was a half a dozen times where he got some really good shot opportunities over points on these birds, and he's just missing. And his dog Lucy, Pointer, she goes on point. He gets up there. about a half a dozen flush off. He shoots both barrels, misses, and he's just sitting there cursing, throwing his hat, whatnot. And he's just sitting there, and he's looking at me, yelling at me, taking out some frustration on me. And I'm like, I didn't do it, man. But when he reloaded, he's so mad. And then he takes a couple steps, and another half dozen get out and flush out. And I'm like, and he's just standing there, and I'm like, it's a testament to, I mean, they were just under his feet, but it's amazing how you look at a picture of those birds and you're like, there's no way they blend in, right? But then when they're on the ground, like, good luck spotting them, man. That camo is something crazy. Yeah,
it's really remarkable how they know how to hunker down just right to where they just kind of disappear.
Yeah,
and like you said, they'll be right in front of you.
Yep. Well, do you have any fun trips planned this year? Or are you just doing the prairie grouse again, and then end up in, you're down in Texas, so you're not too far off from the scalies?
We're gonna go up north in September, do the prairie grouse and Huns, and then probably do a lot of. I think we're kind of rebounding down here, so, and in New Mexico. So in between there and Western Oklahoma, it's gonna be my stomping grounds probably this year.
Nice.
So I can get a couple species of quail and. I don't know if I'll ever hunt Kansas again in the near future, but I sure did like it when it was booming.
Yeah, it's hopefully it bounces back. I mean, it seems like every year there's a state that falls off and a state that kind of pops up, and
it's rotational.
Yeah, it's all rotational.
They're getting some better rain this year, so it'll take a couple of years, but I'm starting to kind of get the itch to chase a wild pheasant again. It's been a couple of years since I have, but they just never really been my niche. But we'll see. We'll see where that goes. Maybe South Dakota. Make a quick run to South Dakota or something like that.
Well, have you screwed with
my friends?
Have you screwed with roughies or woodcock or anything like that yet?
No, I really want to get up to the what is it, like the Upper Peninsula and kind of do the woodcock and and the grouse up there. I think that would be a lot of fun. I don't know when that'll happen. Within the next year or two, I'd like to make a trip to Hawaii, actually.
Yeah.
And go hunt the Franklin, and I think they have chukar and pheasant out there. It just kind of depends on where you're at. But been looking into that. What it takes to get a dog out there. I'll take my old dog and just see what we can't do.
Man, that's the trick. I've looked into it a few times. It's always getting the dog out there, the quarantine process, getting them on the island. It's such a hassle, and but it's on my list as well, because I mean, man, they have some crazy species out there, like the crazy, I can't even remember the name of the black pheasant that they have out there, and the Franklin and stuff like that. So it's craziness.
I think that would just be kind of just a really unique trip that I may never ever do again, but at least
do it once.
It'd be something different. Yeah, absolutely. And I think their season starts in October. It's still beautiful there in October. So
right. I think it's Hawaii. Isn't it beautiful there year round?
True. Yeah, true. Yeah.
Well, man, I enjoyed it. Maybe we have to link up, and maybe we can go do this Hawaii trip at some point, or do something crazy like that. But yeah, man, I enjoyed kind of getting to know you a little bit. We'll have to stay in touch, circle back, and do this again. See how the hunting season goes, and recap that. And
absolutely, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, man. You be safe getting up to North Dakota, and then I guess enjoy the heat for the rest of the summer. And
September can't come quick enough.
No, we're just a couple months away, man. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.